State lawmakers are pushing to reform state election laws in the wake of threats from the Trump administration. The measures they're pushing to counteract potential federal action. New York State looking to restrict immigration agents from deputizing local law enforcement. We talked with immigration advocates on how the state efforts are going towards restricting ICE operations. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Earlier this month, the president suggested that the federal government could nationalize voting, sending ripples of frustration and fear across New York and prompting some elected officials to take action. The president floated the idea in an appearance on former FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino's podcast, while also reiterating false claims that he won the 2020 election. The president has explained how elections would be nationalized and the federal government has never been involved in elections at that level due to the constitutional mandating that states control their own elections. That statement from the president coming 9 months shy of the midterm elections and shortly after federal officials raided a Fulton County elections headquarters in Fulton County, Georgia, seizing material from the 2020 election, along with the Trump administration pushing for rare mid-century redistricting in multiple states. For more now on voting reforms, state lawmakers are pushing for before the session ends. Joining us now, one of the lawmakers behind this, State Senator Kristen Gonzalez, chairing the Senate Elections Committee. Senator, thank you for coming on.
It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So what are your top priorities you're hoping to get done this session in terms of this reform?
So as chair of the Elections Committee, one of the biggest things on our mind was election officer protection. So I carried a bill and passed through the Senate an Election Officer Protection Act that essentially, increase the, threshold for crimes if you were threatening or intimidating an election officer, to make sure we're protecting, of course, the folks who are either currently experiencing threats or may experience threats in the future. And then we're also, in addition to that, proud that we passed a fuller package on the first day of the legislative session that covered other issues, whether it was infrastructure for voting machines or looking at voter registration and broadening our voter base. All of those will continue to be priorities because as we've gotten through the Senate, we want to make sure we also get it through the Assembly and certainly onto the governor's desk.
With the issue with the threats, has that been something you're seeing more of? Is that the necessity for this bill now, or is it more preventative, like you're worried about it down the road? Where's that land?
We are in a new age of technology, and the truth is, with social media and additional online platforms, private information can be shared about election officers, and it's something we've seen in other states. There was a nationwide poll that was done recently that said 38% of election officers nationwide had already experienced some sort of intimidation or threat. So while in New York we haven't seen a significant rise in it, I think it is really timely and important to make sure we're proactive here and we're actually introducing legislation to meet this moment and also meet, of course, the idea of doxing and new technological threats and disseminating that private or sensitive information about election officers.
And infrastructure-wise, what would this be? Money allocated to help make it just easier for people to vote, or shoring up voting places? Talk about that a little bit.
Yes, so we, and certainly through the executive budget, we are in the process of passing our executive budget. We are looking at increasing money and funding for local boards across the state. We have looked at funding for modernization. We just had a budget hearing on this in which modernization was a focus. We have some old infrastructure that certainly needs upgrading. So we want to make sure that the funding is there for that. Another issue actually my office has worked on, and when we talk about infrastructure, it's not only physical infrastructure, it's digital infrastructure. I had a full day event on election cybersecurity in December, and we had stakeholders from across the state come together because the understanding is that the threat landscape is changing and evolving, and the threats are increasing over time. So we're also, through this executive budget, looking at language to introduce a navigator program, introduce increasing resources for election cybersecurity, not just for the state board, which is doing, by the way, a phenomenal job on this, but also for our more local boards that, on one hand, of course, need more modern infrastructure, but on the other, probably also need more support in the cyberspace as they upgrade.
We get spoiled with our smartphones and our Amazon accounts, where if I want sneakers, I can go bing, bing, bing. 10 seconds later, I have sneakers being mailed to me. I think people would love to see voting that way, where I don't even have to go to a polling place. I just pull it up on my phone. Oh, there's my local thing. Put in a code. are we ever going to get there, do you think? Or is the cyber issue part of this, where it's like we got to be very careful because you don't want somebody in another part of the world hacking into an election and, messing with the votes?
I hear that often, and I think if there's a bill you have on on making voting more accessible, I am happy to see it as the chair. But that being said, there is so much to do in our current process. We're looking at, for example, Senator Janaris has a bill on automatic voter registration to make sure that more folks are registered and more seamlessly registered to vote, certainly when they interact with agencies like the DMV. I think prioritizing those in our current system really make a lot of sense, because what we want is to expand our voter base so that every voter has the right and the ability to exercise their fundamental right to vote in our democracy. And I think that's what makes a healthy democracy. So we're focusing on the current system, but we certainly are hoping to put forth a long-term vision for what truly accessible, expansive, voter education, voter access, ballot box initiatives really look like.
And where's the governor in all this? Is she on board with the things you're getting passed through, that it's not going to have an issue getting by her desk?
We've certainly seen a lot of partnership from the executive on this issue. I think she is very much in alignment that we need to support our election infrastructure across the state. And one thing I'll actually note is that we've had a lot of success working on with our governor is on the issue of deepfakes in elections. So I also chair the Internet Technology Committee, and 2 years ago helped pass the New York Fair Act in the executive budget with the governor's office and support to set the first standard in New York for what it means to have deceptive media that is trying to misinform voters.
Yeah.
And this year, she actually introduced some new proposals on that.
Yeah, literally as we're taping this, there was a video going viral on TikTok. It has nothing to do with elections. It was Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise fighting, and somebody just put it out, and it's completely, it looks exactly like them. It sounds like them, but it's all fake. I mean, somebody could take a candidate and say, oh, did you see what she said about black people or about the poor or about whatever? And you're going, oh my God, I can't vote for this person. And you realize that never happened.
That is such a good point. I think one, in that the quality of AI generated content has increased and improved much more rapidly than I think any of us could have anticipated in the last few years. And I think the second good point there is that this is absolutely transferring over to our elections. And in the last election cycle last year, we had actual instances of ads, political ads being put forward that were AI generated and were disingenuous.
Yeah.
In our bill 2 years ago, we set a standard that said you got to have a watermark, and that watermark has to be in the same font and very visible as the rest of the text in that ad. And we didn't see people following that. So this year in the executive budget, we're coming back and saying we got to be a lot stronger in those protections.
Sure.
Because campaigns across levels of government are already trying to use AI to convince a voter that something happened that just fundamentally did not happen.
Right. Well, we'll have to leave it there. Senator, thank you for coming on today. We do appreciate your time.
I appreciate it so much, and invite, if anyone has questions, to come look at our website, reach out to our office. We're always happy to hear feedback.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
New York State sparring with immigration officials yet again, this time over police entering into agreements with ICE. How the state is working to abolish these agreements. My advocates say the proposed laws make immigrants' lives safer. By the way, if you got a comment or story idea, please tell us about it. You can email us at newsatnews10.com. We're also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. New York State pushing to ban all partnerships that will allow local law enforcement to work with immigration agents. The push to end the partnerships, or 287G agreements, coming after the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis. The agreements allow for law enforcement and immigration and customs enforcement to work together in various capacities. Earlier this month, Governor Hochul hosted a roundtable hearing how the Local Cops, Local Crimes Act would limit police involvement in these ICE operations. Joining us now, Murad Awada, the president and CEO of the Immigration Coalition. Murad, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For those who don't know what the Immigration Coalition is, what is it you guys do?
The New York Immigration Coalition is the oldest and largest immigrant rights organization in the United States. We have over 200 members who are organizations across the state of New York. We collectively work together on advocacy, policy, and services to ensure that everyone who calls New York home has the ability not just to survive, but to thrive here.
So much attention on Minneapolis, what happened there in the last few months, but things have also been happening in New York as well. Maybe not as getting the headlines or as awful as we saw something happen there, but talk about that a little bit. This is an ongoing struggle for your group, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really it's been horrifying to watch what has transpired, not just in Minnesota, but what happened in Illinois and what happened in LA before that. But we are now witnessing the horrors of ICE and their rogueness and lawlessness on a global stage. Things that we used to complain about and advocate against because they were doing harm in our community are now front and center. Which is why now the vast majority of Americans who call this country home are also really displeased with what's happening within that agency, and why there's been even more people who are waking up to the fact that this has never been about safety and security. It's been about cruelty, and that's their point.
And what are you hoping to see accomplished at a legislative level or a official level here in New York State? Where are they doing well, and where do they need to do better in terms of protecting people?
Well, this year, we're fighting for the New York For All Act, which would prohibit the state of New York from using any of our local and state resources to collude with immigration enforcement without a judicial warrant. What that means is that we won't be allowing local law enforcement to work with enforcement agents or to deputize them as immigration enforcement agents, which we are seeing happen across the state of New York with 287G agreements. Our local and state taxes should be going to making us all safer and make our communities more thriving as opposed to more harming of our families and our communities here. So it's really to make sure that we're using our resources wisely and that we're continuing to uphold public safety. We're all less safe if someone in our ecosystem feels like they cannot go to the police. And that's what's happening right now in 14 counties across the state of New York, where we're seeing these 287G agreements proliferate. And even, one county has realized it's really not in their best interest to be having this agreement and now is backtracking from it. So, we don't want to be put in a position where, regardless of where you're living, that you can't call the police if, you feel unsafe or you're a victim of a crime or you witnessed a crime. For us to all be safer, we all need to feel safe enough to call for help.
How do you push back on the side of this argument that says, look, they're just going after criminals, people who, not just beyond coming into the country without permission, but they've done things wrong, broken the law. Those are the ones we're trying to grab, so you should be behind this. Is it your argument that's just too broad a statement that they're really going after a lot of people, not just those who've broken the law while they're here?
Well, that's actually their data proves that they're lying. And what we've seen the Department of Homeland Security and the Trump administration do consistently over their 1 year and 1 month in office has been lied to the American public. Over 70% of people who have been detained by DHS or other federal agencies, because now they've weaponized every federal agency to do civil immigration enforcement. They are going after whoever that they can. Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court and the Supreme Court allows now for them to racially profile people. And that's how the vast majority of these arrests are happening. If you look black or brown and they're going to come up to you, ask you for your papers, this is really a remarkable time to be living in. When I asked a class of high school students, when was there a time where there were secret police with masks covering their faces, asking people for their papers in the streets, the only correlation that these high school students came back to was Nazi Germany.
Right. Are you also seeing a case where, and I know we've interviewed an immigration attorney up here in Albany, where she said, I've got people who are doing everything the correct way. They've got all their paperwork filed. They've got court dates coming up where they have an argument to say why I should be allowed to stay. They're now afraid to even show up where before they would not have been. Are you seeing that as well, where people who are coloring way inside the lines now are still scared to even show up for a court appointment they were looking forward to, but now they're worried they're going to get grabbed.
Yeah. Here in New York City, we have 3 different courthouses or ICE check-in locations. And what we've seen over the past, I would say, 7 months is that the Department of Homeland Security, ICE, HSI, Border Patrol, and other federal agencies have been driven into these courthouses to trick people to get there, trap them when they get there, detain them, and to disappear them. These are people who literally have filed immigration relief applications. They are going through the process. If there was a right, oftentimes you hear the right and wrong way, but if there was a right way of doing, getting your paperwork done, it is this way. And over 3,500 New Yorkers have pretty much been detained and for doing nothing but literally following the process.
Gotcha.
And, many of them have been able to, fight to get out of detention, but only after months of being detained. Imagine your life being, you're a business owner and there's no one left to run your business because you are now detained. You get out 6 months later, and what are you coming back to?
Right.
It's just really unfathomable.
And we're out of time, but real quick, if somebody wants to reach out to you or if they just want more help in this issue, if they're concerned about it, what do you recommend?
For folks to learn what their rights are, and we encourage everyone, including U.S. citizens, to know what their rights are, visit our website, nyc.org/KYR. That's nyc.org/KYR. And we have a lot of resources there for people who need immigration legal services. We strongly encourage them to reach out to the New York State Office of New Americans, who will then pass them through a referral system to get them free immigration legal services.
All right. Thank you, Murata Wilder. Thank you for coming on today and giving us that information.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it. Last week, we spoke to the new Assembly Minority Leader about his priorities for the legislative session. When we come back, we'll continue that conversation with Ed Rah and how he is looking to improve child care across New York State. If you got a comment or story idea, tell us about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. We're also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at WTEN. Welcome back. Last week, we talked with the newly elected Assembly Minority Leader Ed Rah on his priorities for the legislative session and his opinions on Bruce Blakeman's campaign for governor. We continue our conversation with the Assemblyman now this week on what he's focusing on for the session and beyond. One of the other big things I keep seeing over and over again in the last couple of weeks or months has been expanding child care. We got to take care of child care, almost from cradle to I guess 12th grade. We want to make sure we're taking care of these kids. It's certainly laudable, but it also costs money. Where do you stand on all that, expanding child care and helping with daycare and all those things between the younger kids, 2, 3, 4 years old?
Yeah, I think it's an important issue that has a lot of bipartisan support. Helping people afford child care. We have done some things with in terms of tax credits and those types of things in the last few years. Our conference actually put forth a pretty comprehensive child care plan a couple of years ago, and a lot of those things are things that have now come forward over the last couple of years. I think the thing though that we want to make sure is, the whole idea of universal child care sounds to me like they want to do a program where, we don't in any way means test it, make sure it's only going to to people who should have access to it. It is going to be very expensive if it's done that way. The pre-K side of it, New York City has largely had universal pre-K. The reimbursement rates per pupil that go to the school districts in the rest of the state have not really been sufficient to do that. So, I'm supportive of doing that so that we can offer pre-K to any parent who wants it for their child. But the bottom line is we have to do it by reprioritizing our spending, not by, continuing to increase our budget by billions and billions of dollars. And I view childcare as an economic development issue. And the state's economic development programs, every study that looks at them says they're failing. They're not delivering their bang for their buck. So I think it's reprioritizing that type of spending towards things like childcare rather than saying, okay, we're going to just increase the overall budget.
And last question, it's become so partisan, not just in New York, but especially around the country. But we'll focus on New York since the show's called Empire State Weekly. Can you get things done if there's an R in front of your name, or if you had a bill for sunshine and puppies and chocolate chip cookies for everybody, would it just be rejected out of hand because, oh wait, he's a Republican, we're not? Because you don't, they control the houses, and can you get things done if you have a good idea, or is it too partisan these days?
Well, Ronald Reagan once said, "There's no limit to what a man can do if he doesn't care who gets the credit." There are ways to get things done. Sometimes you have to be willing to, work with somebody on the other side of the aisle to do it. But those of us who have been around for a while in the legislature, know who on the other side of the aisle are interested in what issues, and you are able to get things done by working across the aisle and pushing an issue forward that way.
Stick around. Back with a look at the week ahead in just a bit. And again, if you've got a comment or story idea, tell us. You can email us at newsandnews10.com. We're also on X at WTEN. Finally, at Empire State Weekly, New York City and Albany once again butting heads, this time over Mayor Zohran Mamdani's proposed tax hike on richer New Yorkers to fix the city's $5 billion budget gap. The mayor is threatening if that hike is not approved, and he needs state approval and the governor's approval, he'd be forced to raise property taxes on the city residents. Governor Hochul previously said she committed over $1 billion down in New York City just to help with this budget gap. The gambit by Mamdani angering his city leaders and the supporters, with the mayor even acknowledging that this hike, if it happens, could endanger his rent freeze promise. We'll be sure to keep an eye on this important story and bring you all your analysis. For now, from all of us here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. I'll see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of the show on 10 TV stations across the great state of New York.